I was born on the north side of Pittsburgh, as a, you know.
So you're raised in the Pittsburgh area. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And make a long story short, I come home from when we was living in Blocks. My name was Moss, Donnie Moss, because the people I was staying with was named Moss. I didn't realize that at that time. I thought that's what my name was, Moss. And here the people, I come home from school and there were people at the house, and here Mrs. Moss had passed away. So what happened is that I put the next day I put my belongings in my wheelbarrow and moved down a block and a half and moved into a house with people named Senecals. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I had my own room and all that stuff, and they were wonderful people. He was a mill worker and she was a stay-home mom, and they had raised 5 children of their own by that time. One of them was a professor at Slippery Rock University, Skeet, and etc. But it was a great family. But I only stayed there a year because the courts told them they were too old to have a young person like me, to raise a young person like me. So what happened is, at the end of that year, they took me down to downtown Pittsburgh and put me on a train, and I had a shopping bag with my belongings in it, and I ended up in a town called Palatka, Florida, which is 52 miles south of Jacksonville, Florida, in an orphanage there started by Homer Rodeheaver, who was the musical director for the evangelist Billy Sunday. And that's where I stayed until I was 17. Now at that orphanage I was discovered to have a good singing voice. And make a long story short, Homer Rodeheaver had plans for me to get a scholarship in the University of Miami in music. But Homer Rodeheaver died, and I believe to this day that I was in his will for a lot of things to come to me because he had no children. And that brother-in-law got rid of me, got me out of that orphanage. They threw me out, to tell you the truth. And I can remember, as messed up as I was back then, I can remember the secretary in Palatka coming out of the office yelling up at the bus when we were pointing, Donnie, Donnie, what they're doing to you is wrong, what they're doing to you is wrong. Of course, I'm a kid, 17, I didn't understand the hearts of men then and the ways of the world.
Wow.
You know, but as time, after I sober up, and I'd say it took about 5 years for my mind to clear up, I began to piece it all together through the years. And that's what I come up with. That's exactly what happened. I left there with 3 shirts, 2 pair of pants, a $5 bill and a bus ticket. And I moved back to Senecals, the people that I had stayed with. Tried going back to school, but by the time I left that orphanage, I had made up my mind that nobody was ever going to tell me what to do again. And I hated adults. Hated any kind of authority. I was a messed up young boy. And that's what an orphanage will do to you. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Now, at what point, what year was this, did you leave the orphanage?
I left when I was 17. So I was born in 38. 17 and 38 was...
That would be 55.
Yeah. So I went into the Navy. I signed up for 4 years. I lasted 1 year, 4 months, and 11 days.
That's very precise.
Yeah, and the reason being is simply this. There's a Chinese proverb that says this: the man takes the drink, and then the drink takes the man. And at age 17, 3 weeks into boot camp, you could go to that they call the slop shoot. And that's where I had my first beer. And from my first beer, I was hooked. I was a hellraiser, and I was an alcoholic. And booze told me where I was going, how I was going to think, who I was going to associate with, etc. I became a slave to the drug alcohol. I never took anything else. I never popped a pill or smoked a joint or shot something in my arm, you know what I mean? I didn't have to. Alcohol gave me what I wanted, and I didn't want to feel, you know. But finally, in 1969, I was sitting in a bar in Oakmont, Pennsylvania, and a voice said to me, and now I have to be all honest here, I never knew anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, but a voice said to me, you go to the phone and you call Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did that, and the miracle was simply this, Nate. At that time, I was so mentally deranged that I couldn't even look up a number in the telephone book. I would have to go into a bar and look for a newspaper to find out what day it was and things like that. And but I went to that telephone. That's when they had telephones on the wall.
Right.
Okay? And I looked up the number. I called Alcoholics Anonymous. A lady talked to me and told me to go home. And a man would come to my home to talk to me. And I went home, and a man came to my house. His name was Huey Dashball. He was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Navy. And he came and shared his story with me, told me what alcohol did to him. And I listened to that man. This was on a Saturday. And by the time he was done with me, I said to myself, well, if this man's telling me the truth, because then I didn't believe anybody for anything. I said, if this guy's telling me the truth, I'm going to go to one of these meetings. And what I did is I went to Oakmont meeting in 1969, to my first meeting. And I knew when I left there that those people had my answers.
So you're introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous through divine intervention. There's really no other way to describe it at that point. And then you reach step 3 of AA.
Yeah, I asked my sponsor, I said, what's this God stuff? I said, how do you know about God? He said, well, Don, he says, where do you think you would go to? Who knows about God? I said, I don't know. He said, the church. He said, if you want to find out about God, go to church. And that's what I did. A man named Don Harden became my sponsor, and he was my sponsor for 45 years.
Wow.
And
Don Harden?
Don Harden. And he passed away. He touched more lives, I bet you, than Billy Graham.
That's a statement right there.
But wow. No, that he was quite a advocate of Alcoholics Anonymous, helped hundreds of men to get sober and all that business. And it's a ripple effect.
Right.
You know, I got sober, so therefore my wife's life became better. My children became better. I was a better neighbor, better employee. Everybody that knew me was better off having known me than when I was a drunk. It's a ripple effect. God honors it. You know.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a 9th grade education. Make a long story short, when I went to work for Bloom Engineering, I went to work there as a janitor. One day, I'm bricking this furnace. And as I'm bricking it, I hear this voice. Hey, Bowers! Hey, Bowers! I look up and here it's a guy named Don Harden. And he called me up out of there. He said, listen. He said, how would you like to go into production the Department of Production Management? And I laughed at him because you had to at least have a high school education to carry the mail from department to department. I mean, you're talking about an engineering company. Well, everybody had a college degree. They were all engineers. I had to learn. I really had to learn because there were people there that resented me being there. Can you imagine
Oh,
that?
yeah, yeah.
Industrial engineer. These were people with degrees. And here this guy with a GED is coming up there to do this work. And he don't even know how to read a drawing.
Right.
So you can just imagine what some of them people were thinking. When I went to the production department, there were 17 of us in that department. When I left, there was 2 of us, my immediate supervisor and me.
Wow.
Because we went to computerization. And make a long story short, we just limited person after person after person. But the president of the company really liked me.
Wow. So you moved to Brownsville in 1990. And you resigned your job at Bloom
Engineering.
Bloom Engineering.
With no guarantees of anything at 50 years age.
Okay.
I gave it all up, pension and everything else.
So
Talk about a risk taker.
that's for sure.
And that's what I want to tell you. If God tells you to do something, do it. And sometimes, Nate, it makes no sense at all. I can remember sitting in Penn Hills when the movers were coming, sitting on my patio in the backyard when the movers were coming to move us here to Brownsville. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, what the hell are you doing? Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Because I knew what I was going to have to do.
Right.
You know, because God told me what I was going to have to do.
So whenever you moved here to Brownsville, what was Brownsville's reputation then?
No, here's what they said. They said, you're moving here to Brownsville. They said, people don't move into Brownsville. They move out of Brownsville. That was the attitude of the people living right here. Why are you moving here? There's nothing here. It's the absolute truth. That was the absolute truth. But God said, do it, and I did it. We had a person in our church one time named Eileen Burdock, who gave this prophetic word in our parish house. And she said these words, and I'll never forget them. She said, this town is no longer forsaken. I'm good. Make a long story short, God is going to do things here. And I believe that with every fiber in me. And I even believe it even more today. Dream. Dream big. You know, and that's what it takes. It takes dreamers, visionaries, and nuts and bolts guys. It takes it all. You understand? But it takes a vision. Somebody in a position of leadership that can come up with a vision for the town of Brownsville. And if you would sit down for an hour with 3 or 4 people and have a brainstorming session, I'm here to tell you, you could come up with one. Do it. Do it. Yeah, it doesn't take a genius. You know, it just takes somebody thinking about what it would take to create pride in the community of Brownsville.
Right.
What would it take? Well, we'll take a vision and it'll take a plan to execute that vision. Yeah, I can see it, Nate. I have a sense of that this town is really going to change, and it's going to change for the better. Spiritually, financially, physically, every way that you can think of. Someday, Brownsville will be a neat town to move into and raise your family.